Let's explore effortless manifesting. We'll begin with an untapped resource, the middle ground between contrivance and scatteredness. Now, when we talk about contrivance, we talk about completely indulging our controlling tendencies. You know the myth, if it's to be, it's up to me. That's basically metaphysically shooting ourselves in the foot. That's from the path of yang, and the path of yang will take you many places, but fulfillment is not one of them. The opposite of contrivance is scatteredness, and that's, like when you give a kid too much chocolate and then they stand up and spin around in circles until they stagger about like a sailor on dry land. That also is not going to get us what we want. So to the middle ground is this centered spontaneity. And the most efficient way to cultivate this centered spontaneity is by making the most of our autonomic nervous system, which is a fancy way of describing the most basic corner of our central nervous system, our spinal cord. Every time we breathe in, whether we know it or not, we are accessing our sympathetic nervous system. It has not evolved for active concentration. That is not a sound survival mechanism. It has evolved for just perception. Perception that is vulnerable, passive, visceral, and random. So, I'm going to take a break from tripping over my tongue. It is wired so that we can notice things such as sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, including emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. Now, what is the ideal thing to do with that which we perceive, that which we experience as we breathe in? We meditate. But how does that work? Every time we exhale, we are wired, thanks to our parasympathetic nervous system, to physically relax and mentally release. And I'm going to show you now in the next 30 seconds how this applies to optimal God-level manifesting. You know when you play a video game and you go into God mode and all of a sudden you're above the players as opposed to looking at things as a player? That's what we're talking about here. There is a basic fundamental duality the Buddha taught about. He talked about this duality being that between dread and desire, between aversion and avarice, between pushing and pulling. So let's work with this. We evolved to survive long enough to reproduce. There's basically, evolution has two phases. There's the random mutation and there's natural selection. And natural selection is brutally simple. Let's pretend there's a new human who just got pushed out of his mom. And once he's old enough to start making his way through the world, that mutation will either undermine his ability to live long enough and reproduce, serve and enhance his ability to live long enough to reproduce, or have no effect on his ability to live long enough and reproduce. If that mutation undermines his ability to live long enough to reproduce, that trait is not passed forward. That's it. That's just how natural selection works. So we have evolved a wonderful peril detector. That's not our enemy. That's what kept our ancestors alive long enough to make smartphones. So, so in view of the wonders of our autonomic nervous system, what do we want to do when a dread comes up, a fear comes up? As we breathe in and maintain an impeccable posture, we notice it. The only label we need to use is simply the demonstrative pronoun this. So when a fear comes up, it could be fear of being rejected in a relationship. It could be fear of not getting a sale or not getting a promotion. It could be a fear of not getting the physique you want. Whatever dread pops into your mind, notice it with the utmost of vulnerability as you breathe out. And then as you exhale, physically relax and mentally release. Now here's the cool thing. We don't have to force the process. Thanks to our parasympathetic nervous system, we are already wired to do this. Then why even meditate? Because we are giving our 3-pound squishy supercomputer between our ears a chance to exercise the intention to cooperate with the most fundamental autonomic nervous system. Doing this informs our intuition and guides our centered spontaneity so that it influences our choices and our utterances and our deeds in such a way as to sidestep that potential landmine responsible for the fear and the dread and its causes. We don't have to do this actively. We're doing this from the place of centered spontaneity. I don't know about you, but I spent many an hour of my youth watching Kung Fu theater. And not the Kung Fu student, but the Kung Fu master was always depicted as being laid back and his eyes seem to be focused off in the distance, and he'll make the most subtle movement and avoid the kick or the punch or the grapple. Whereas the student makes dramatic movements and still gets his ass handed to him. So we want to we want to walk with that type of mastery that we describe as centered spontaneity. And thus, when a dread spontaneously manifests and we process it through our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems of noticing and releasing, we are informing our central nervous system, we're informing our centered spontaneity in a way that keeps the barge of our life from getting stuck on a sandbar, on a metaphoric sandbar. Now let's continue. What's the opposite of dread? Well, it's desire. So what is the benefit? So we don't have to sit there and stick the tongue out of our mouth and crinkle our forehead and sharpen our pencil and write down our 5-year plan and, work out 47-page outline and, massacre 47 magazines to make a epic vision board worthy of the Guggenheim. No, we don't have to do that. As we sit impeccably in meditation, desires will occur to us. Circumstantial desires, physical desires, interpersonal desires, mental desires. Hey, I want to see that new movie. Anything is going to come up. We are wired for that. There are a handful of wonderful monologues delivered by Al Pacino in the 1990s movie Devil's Advocate, which, if you haven't seen, watch it. It is amazing. And at one point, and I'm going to do a terrible paraphrase, Al Pacino's character says, humans have evolved a laser-like intensity for desire. And the answer is, yes, we have. We really have. So as we sit impeccably in meditation and a desire comes to us, we notice that desire as we breathe in. We notice it vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. We notice that desire, simply labeling it with this, the demonstrative pronoun this. And then as we exhale, once again, we physically relax. And physical relaxing is like a wave upon which mental release surfs automatically and effortlessly. And you might ask, well, why am I letting go of this desire? Because our capacity to make it happen is like comparing a crumb, a single grain of salt, to the enormity of the Matterhorn. And the Matterhorn would be our centered spontaneity's capacity to make things happen and to allow things to happen versus our teeny tiny grain of salt ability to sort of nudge things along pathetically and lamely, creating only a mere shadow of what we first desired. So we notice and we relax in such a way that informs our centered spontaneity and empowers it. Noticing informs our centered spontaneity, but releasing empowers our centered spontaneity. I don't know if you're as geeky as me. I don't know if you've been watching the second season of Loki, but they've got this temporal loom, which is really, really cool. And it looks basically like two funnels, but they're teeny tiny points pointing in, and the big parts pointing outward. And they've got this temporal energy coming in one end and leaving in a more combed and organized way on the other end. And that's kind of what we are doing when we're meditating. All that scattered input we are noticing. And as we relax and release, it departs in a combed and synergetic and useful way. I remember during my first relationship after my divorce, I was with someone basically because she liked Star Wars, she had a pulse, and she was warm for my form. That was not enough. That was not a great, that was an insufficient compatibility. And as she kept breaking my heart left and right, I would kvetch or complain to a friend of mine. And he'd say, let go of the rope. Get out of your own way. That meant nothing to me. I had no idea what he was speaking of. By not only noticing what we dread and desire, but physically relaxing and mentally releasing, we are getting out of our own way. We are letting go of the ropes of the mediocre and making ourselves open and available to that which is optimal and healing and sustainable and fulfilling. I very much look forward to meditating with you in less than 90 seconds. But first, let's take a bit for housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you through Patreon. If you love Star Wars and you wish to meditate like young Luke Skywalker on Dagobah under the guidance of Yoda, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. And now for a bit of good news. If at any point during this early morning's live stream you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them to your life, do not be shy. Do not hesitate. Strike while the iron is hot and type your question in great detail in the chat window. Where's the chat window? Or if you're using a laptop or a desktop, it'll be on the right-hand side of the screen. And let's see here. If you're using a smartphone, it should be down there. Okay. Welcome to this morning's practice text, Easy Dzogchen. But first, I feel silly? Let's take a moment to, together as a team, chant the Friday morning excerpt from the Spaciousness of Vajrasattva, also known as Dorje Sampa Nam Kache, composed by Prahe Vajra, also known as Gaurab Dorje. And once again, if you find any of this puzzling, give me a shout out. Very specific shout out in the chat window, and I'll happily answer your questions. Together. All possible circumstances and all beings in them arise non-dually from the pristine continuum. In the purity of divine presence there are no such distinctions as male or female. In the domain of reality there is no talk of getting somewhere by means of effort. And yet some say that by using the powers of sound, one can generate the bliss of a magical illusion. The true condition cannot be spontaneous. Let's try that again. The true condition cannot be grasped conceptually, but appears in varied ways according to how one views it. To strive for bliss, desiring it to manifest, only generates obscuration and confusion. Meditating on the appearances of a deity is like meditating on the reflections of the moon in water. Although such meditators strive to be undefiled and unattached, their practices are like child's play. And now we turn to this morning's primary practice text, Easy Dzogchen. My students have found that my students seem to prefer a bit of structure. And just as every Olympic sprint begins with a starter's pistol and ends with a finish line, I found that people prefer the closure and the structure of beginning with a short chant of empathy and enthusiasm and concluding the same way. Together. May I liberate all beings by relying on the three jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the three jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the three jewels. So just like we mentioned during class, mindfulness and meditation are known by many names, including Zen, Shan, Jnana, Mahamudra, Mahasandhi, Ati Yoga, Dzogchen, and Trekcho. What is the key to mindfulness? Not active concentration, but to merely perceive, vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly, during each inhalation, thanks to our sympathetic nervous system. As we do that, we can silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this, wherein we notice sight, sound, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, such as emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. But what do we do with these things? We meditate upon them. And so during each exhalation, we physically relax and mentally release. And we do that to such a degree that whatever we perceived during the previous inhalation can now feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast, empty void. And so we see void is not a verb, void is a noun used as a metaphor. We do not force it, it's something that occurs naturally and spontaneously in our viscera. Therefore, during each inhalation, we could silently and mentally recite this. During each relaxing exhalation, we could silently and mentally recite void. So let's sit impeccably and begin. And as we sit in meditation, we might notice ourselves rehearsing perhaps a conversation. That's neither good nor bad, it simply is. The question is, how are we going to process it to maximize our peace, to maximize our creative power? So we might do this exercise. For the next 3 or 4 breaths, we might silently and mentally recite the word cognition as we breathe in, because that's what we're doing. And because we like to balance the syllables, as we exhale, we might silently and mentally recite the adjective emptiness. Let's play with, and then when we're done playing with that, or we could return to our default practice. The next time we notice ourselves planning, and there's nothing wrong with that, our job is not to repress, our job is to observe and relax. So once again, if we find ourselves planning, we could silently and mentally recite cognition as we breathe out, and emptiness as we breathe, cognition as we breathe in, and emptiness as we breathe out. When we feel ourselves desiring for a plan or an errand to go well, we could we could look at that non-dualistically. And instead of saying desire, we could simply refer to it as emotion. For both desire and dread are emotions. So emotion, emptiness. And then we could return to our default of this void. Anybody who has ever lived with a cat knows that they love pushing things off of surfaces, be it counters or etagères or dressers. And one's life is spent continually picking up after the cat. There is no end to this practice. As long as the cat lives, it is a adorable chaos demon. So the goal of living with a cat is not to always pick things up because there's no end to it. But if we're going to enjoy our life with a cat, the key is to find humor in picking up after the cat. Finding humor in our role as the feline's minion. Similarly, as we meditate, our job is not to get rid of mental energy. Our job is to harness mental energy. And so, like the cat owner continually picking bric-a-brac up off the floor and replacing it, we notice and sometimes select a different word and release in a way that informs our centered spontaneity. if we begin watching a fantasy or an anticipation play out, as we breathe in, we could silently and mentally recite the monosyllabic verb watch, and as we exhale, we could silently and mentally recite the adjective or the metaphor void. And then return to our default, this void. The screen is going to go berserk for a moment. I will adjust it as soon as I can. Fabulous. Now, you could ask yourself, why is there a painting of two Buddhas sitting in tantric union? Because it reminds us of the white puffy clouds and the blue sky. It reminds us of the play of watching, the play of mind, and then relaxing into mind's non-graspable nature. With every inhalation and every exhalation. As we sit impeccably in meditation, we may notice a discomfort in our body. That's normal. We evolve the capacity to experience pain, not because of some malevolent capriciousness of the universe, or on the part of the universe, but simply because it aids our survival. When our body generates pain, it's saying, hey, you need to do something a little bit different. You need to change something. So ignore teachers who tell you that you must repress pain, or the only reason you feel pain is because you believe in yourself. No, you feel pain because of evolution. Ask a biologist. They'll tell you it's an inconvenient necessity. So as your body informs you that you need to make an adjustment, respect that, listen to it, do what you can. But after a certain point, when you've done everything you can and the discomfort persists, process it. Drop the conundrum represented by the pain into the supercomputer of centered spontaneity and watch things happen. So as you breathe in, you could silently and so we can transcend the duality of pleasure and pain and just work with the verb feel. So in the inhalation, we could silently and mentally recite the verb feel. And then during the exhalation, we could continue reciting the metaphor void. And know, Virginia, that will not make all pain instantly evaporate like a drop of dew under the rising August sun, but it will help us to resist that pain a little bit less, to make peace with the patchwork quilt of the present moment experience, which is changing and varied and interesting. And when we want to, we can return to this void. People will tell you that Dzogchen is mysterious, but no. It is based entirely upon the 7 factors of enlightenment that the Buddha taught a very long time ago. Buddha taught that full enlightenment could be mastered in less than 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. So when someone tells you it's going to take the length of 3 universes, the birth and death of 3 universes to become a Buddha, thank them for their time and then run away from them, because their shit don't work and they're trying to kill your dreams. Beware the dream killers. That's right, we can call them Darth Dreamkiller. So whether we are experiencing the bliss of receiving our favorite sexual favor or the pain of enduring arthritic deterioration, the booby prize of aging, they are both still sensations. And our reaction is the same. We're feeling them. And so we can sidestep duality without repressing our thoughts, simply through the cunning use of vocabulary. According to Sturgeon's law, 90% of everything sucks. 90% of everyone sucks. Therefore, 90% of meditation teachers suck, but not in a fun, tingly way. The same teachers who will tell you if you're truly spiritual, you will never adjust your posture. They won't call it responding to your body's needs. They will call it fidgeting. Or the same teachers who say that if because of you sitting motionless and because of you ignoring your body's cries for modification, you develop bone spurs and torn lining and arthritis, then it must be because of your rotten karma, not because of their mashugana instructions. Find yourself a wise teacher. Good morning and welcome to the live stream. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them to your life, type the question in the chat window. If you're super observant, you may have noticed in ridiculously small font the phrase second collection or two collections. How do you count 17 rounds? Simple. During each inhalation, you could advance your left thumb upon your left hand. I'm going to speed up time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Well, that's one short less of 17. Where's the 17th? Well, if we're counting rounds on our left hand, we're counting sets on our right hand. And so, for instance, if we are touching the tip of our right index finger to the, right ring finger to the ring knuckle of our left hand, that's 17. So we would start with 1, and then count the 16 creases and tips of your finger, and that would get you 17. Now, do you have to do this? No. But if you ever plan on practicing by yourself, it may be useful. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but how do we count 20 sets? Well, on our right hand, we would count sets of 17 on our hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. But that's just 16. How do we get to 20? Well, we would count 5 on each finger. 1, 2, 3, 4. Where's the 5th? The 5th is touching the first is touching the tip of the finger to its corresponding part on the other hand. So knuckle here. So first set of 17 rounds. Second set of 17 rounds. Third set of 17 rounds. Fourth set of 17 rounds. Fifth set of 17 rounds. Is this ungainly? Yeah, sure, you betcha. But we live in crazy times. We live in times where police can confiscate mala and various contemplative accoutrements, but they can't confiscate our hands. So wherever we find ourselves, we always have the tools we need to practice. Now, is this something you need to master today? No. But if you play with it for 5 minutes, once a day, by the end of the month, you will have mastered it. If, as you sit in meditation, for the briefest of moments or longer, you experience you spontaneously imagine something you would like in your life, whether it's circumstantial or physical or interpersonal or mental. You momentarily get a flash of an unmet, unfulfilled desire. That's great. If it's purely visual, then you could play with watch void. If there's some emotion involved, some desire involved, some longing involved, then you can practice emotion emptiness. And so make a game of it. Have fun with it. What if there's romantic frustration? What if there's someone in your life you fancy and it's not mutual? Well, if you watch movies, they'll tell you need to do some grand gesture and win their heart. That's called stalking, and it's disrespectful of other people's autonomy. And so what if our desires for others are not necessarily a chain that shackles us to forever to someone who has no desire for us? What if instead it was just inspiring us for something equally as good or better? And what if that specific person was just a placeholder, a metaphor for a heretofore unfulfilled or unrealized potential? So when we have a flash of desire or longing or frustration as we breathe in, we crank it through the coffee grinder of meditation. Either watch void or feel void or emotion emptiness or imagine emptiness. Whatever's going on, we process it, and we thus inform our centered spontaneity. Therefore, transforming our life from a tragedy into an exciting adventure. A song of teenage longing from the 50s talks about, I think it's Dream Lover. And at one point, the singer laments, "But I'm dreaming my life away." And that is the lament of many frustrated manifestors. What if the path was the goal? What if processing dreads and desires into wisdom and bliss was the goal, and the results thereof was just fringe benefits? And you can go to the store and get an okay sheet cake with basically tasteless bread and overly sugary icing. And the cake becomes like a delivery device for icing. But if you're fortunate, you can eat a cake that's so delicious it doesn't need icing. And then when you do get the icing, it just blows your mind. That's what meditation offers us. A cake so delicious, icing is not required. And when it does show up, what a delightful surprise. And that is the difference between being a slave to our cravings versus a partner with our cravings. I've met people, many people, who believe the spiritual path is about repressing desire. And these are not happy people. These are not joyful people. And yet the fourth enlightenment factor is joy. So joy becomes a barometer of the efficacy of our contemplative practice. If we are a sourpuss, cranky curmudgeon, in the words of Bugs Bunny, we must have taken a wrong turn at Albuquerque. When we read Dzogchen texts or Zen instruction manuals, we often come across the phrase Buddha nature. What does that mean? Well, Buddha nature is an Iron Age term. It can best be explained in the digital age from the perspective of neuroscience. And just as many of us who film videos for TikTok own a tripod, our Buddha nature is like a tripod. The first point of the tripod is our sympathetic nervous system, which is the basis of mindfulness. The second point of the tripod would be our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the basis of meditation. And the third point of the tripod would be our anterior cingulate gyrus, the seat of empathy. Every healthy vertebrate life form on the planet has these three neurological pieces of equipment, and therefore it is possible for them to practice mindfulness, meditation, and empathy. What if liberation was simply practicing the Buddha's techniques? And what if enlightenment was simply mastering the Buddha's techniques? I don't know about you, but when I was a little boy, learning how to tie my shoes was a mystery, an agony. Now I don't have to think about it. Not at all. Just boom, it's done. I've mastered tying my shoes. I'm able to tie my shoes, and so are you. We're able to tie our shoes spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. So any skill with time and effort can be mastered, whether it's cooking lentils or riding a bicycle or practicing mindfulness meditation. So what if enlightenment was nothing more than mastering these techniques to the point where their practice could be performed spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively? You would still feel the full spectrum of human experiences, from the glorious to the grotesque, but you'd be really good at noticing them and processing them. The liberation the Buddha offered us is not liberation from the unpleasant, but from the tyranny of the unpleasant. The unpleasant can still be there. Your ridiculous uncle can still spout MAGA nonsense during Thanksgiving, but it won't drive you to drink quite as much. You'll be able to process it. You will perceive what you perceive, you will feel what you feel, but you'll have the skill to process it. Welcome aboard. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or their application, type your question in great detail in the chat window. Now, some people say, dude, this is too difficult, I can't do it. You are allowed to have a learning curve. That which feels impossible minute one, day one, feels effortless, minute 60, day 90. Respect your body's limitations. If your body seems to indicate to you that 5 minutes of meditation is all it can deal with, fine. You can start out with 5 minutes of meditation once every 12 hours. And after a week or so, you can add an additional 5 minutes. Progressing thusly, that gently, you could arrive at cruising altitude of easily and comfortably meditating for an hour every morning and every evening within 12 weeks by progressing incrementally. The presence of meditation in your life doesn't have to stress out your body or your schedule or your pets or your partner or your children. They can see the enhancing effect that this practice could have in your life, and then instead of opposing it, they could encourage it, which would be nice. The third factor of enlightenment is energy. When you feel your energy flagging, you could replace the word this with the word watch or the word feel and notice how it affects your body. If you feel you have too much energy, in light of the fifth enlightenment factor, which is tranquility, you could work with the verb taste, which for some reason can make you much more mellow. Taste void, using taste as a metaphor of perception. So there's all sorts of fun tools at your disposal. During the day, when I meditate, I use the word void or emptiness because it protects my energy. When it's time for me to go to bed at night, I replace the word void with the word ease and the word emptiness with the word relaxing, and they knock me out pretty quickly. I learned these various categories of contemplative experiences from spending decades poring over the final meditation manual of the great Tibetan saint Paltrul Rinpoche, who was lauded by the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet. I'm very grateful to have learned these techniques and to have all these hues on my palette that I can draw from as the various needs present themselves. I'm very grateful to the late Chag Dud Tulku, who taught that there is these things that the ancients refer to as the 5 mental poisons or the 5 poisonous emotions, and that when competitiveness comes up as we breathe in, we can silently and mentally recite Vi. And then as we relax into our exhalation, we can silently and mentally recite Void. And watch as that competitiveness is transformed into the all-accomplishing wisdom. And the same holds true for the remaining. How our hating can transform into mirror-like wisdom. Our craving can transform into discerning wisdom. Our dullness could transform into the wisdom of the basic space of phenomena. And our clinging could transform into equalizing wisdom. Simply by plugging it into this formula. How convenient is that? I am grateful to the late Geshe Gyatso, who taught that when we feel drowsy, We could switch to a visual mode, which would bring our eyes to the heavens. And if we feel agitated, we can switch to a grounding mode, which could bring our attention to earth. And I'm grateful to the late Karma Chakme, who taught that those mechanisms with which we might try to adjust our body and mind also give us great contemplative opportunities. When you watch the news and you learn of people, civilians being murdered in the Ukraine or the Congo or in Gaza, our heart spontaneously goes out to these people, regardless of what language they speak or what they believe, because we are empathetic. We are wired for empathy. It's in our DNA. That's why we have mirror neurons. And so as these individuals and their plights cross our minds while sitting in meditation, we could feel emotion, a full spectrum of emotions. We could feel pity, we could feel rage, we could feel fear, but we go back to emotion and emptiness, thus informing our centered spontaneity in a non-dual manner, and then releasing and processing that, and we get to practice effortless international manifesting. And if we are not Gandalf the Grey, if we are not Galadriel the Golden, if the conflicts, the genocides, the atrocities do not end the moment we meditate upon them, then at the very least we are exercising our neural pathways for love and letting go. There is a myth that empathy fuels neurosis, but that only happens if we forget to let go. Fortunately, we are already wired by natural selection to let go with every exhalation. Have you ever noticed that it might take 21 consecutive days to install a good habit and only 3 days to undermine it? Perhaps that is why the Buddha persisted in meditating even after he had mastered the path. If as you sit in meditation, you remember a scene from a movie you saw 20 years ago, as you breathe in, you could silently and mentally recite remember. And as you exhale, you could silently and mentally recite emptiness. And after 3 or 4 rounds, you could return to the standby mechanism, this void. Excuse me. A reasonable question is, what do you do when you've already completed one collection of 20 sets of 17 rounds? You start your second collection. But how do you count that collection if you've run out of knuckles? You work with second knuckles. Kind of like Fellowship of the Ring and Second Breakfast, but not as tasty. Let's seal our meditation practice with a very short chant. 2, actually. May all beings practice have kind communication, conduct, and calmness flow spontaneous and uncontrived. That's all the ethics you need. May everyone be free from misery. May everyone be happy. May no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you could type something in the chat window. You could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could share it with a friend. You could even help support this channel on Patreon. In approximately 2 2.75 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's mid-morning lesson and meditation. Until then, may you and yours be happy and healthy. And if you are as geeky as me, this is the way.